Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm your host, Tony Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Linda Ta Yonemoto, a financial literacy advocate and educator on a mission to help first-generation women build wealth, gain confidence, and create financial legacies. Linda, welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast.
Tony, thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure chatting with yourself. I've seen several of your podcasts and so excited to have a conversation with you today and chat to your audience.
That's awesome. And I really appreciate you being here because I think this is such an important conversation and perspective to address. So appreciate your time and looking forward to your insights. So let's jump in. What is your origin story and what first sparked your passion for financial literacy?
So I think it might be important to take a step back and share that um, my name is Linda Ta Yonemoto. I'm a certified financial educator and founder of Good For You Money. I'm also an award-winning distinguished educator as well. And then I also get quoted in a lot of media as a authoritative expert. What I do is I help bridge the gap between career success and financial freedom that a lot of experts might not consider, especially through the cultural lens of someone who's a first generation person. So I'm not just a financial or money coach. What I have in terms of my experience is that I grew up in a immigrant household. My parents were refugees who came from Vietnam, immigrated to America, obtained citizenship. My uncle was a boatman who had fled Vietnam into Thailand, and he had like sponsored all of us to come over. I grew up with the experience of being a first generation, first in my family. Grew up in like LA, went to school in California, went off to college, and had to learn how to build wealth on my own. So I think what a lot of what I bring is a unique perspective in terms of like professional growth and financial strategies for folks who are first generation, who don't have that background, who don't have that support, who maybe don't have the awareness and the resources, or maybe they do and they're trying to figure out how to prioritize and advance in their careers and really think about money intentionally while still living according to their values and honoring themselves and their families.
Well, that's awesome. So, let's drill down a little bit more. Is what inspired you specifically, and I guess this is probably part of your background,
Mhm.
is to focus on first generation women in particular with your practice?
So I think I started because I wanted to help the younger version of myself. So all the folks who have made the mistakes or like that are potentially making those mistakes and maybe I've made them in the past. I want to warn them and help leave them in a better place. I think it's also really incredibly tough for first generation women and women of color, or people from communities of color, because they're trying to figure out how to crack that code, the wealth code, how to build wealth. It's not just necessarily about earning more. You also have to figure out like the strategies of navigating the corporate world, navigating like the systems that are in place, how to resist falling for some of the financial tricks that maybe other folks are aware of when it comes to marketing and advertising. I say that having spent 14 plus years of my career in marketing and advertising as well. So I help sort of offer that like trifecta of providing folks with insider knowledge to help protect their wealth, build their careers, and also continue to build out that like financial strategy that makes sense so that they can live according to their values. I think one thing that's really interesting as a first gen professional, we do have like a secret power that no one really talks about, and like we're naturally like system thinkers or trying to figure out from scratch how to navigate college, careers, money, like professional networks. And we're really good at connecting the dots that other people might miss. But at the same time, we sometimes don't ask for help. Like it's really hard for folks to ask for help at times. And so think people have been conditioned in some way to think that that's like a disadvantage when it's actually asking for help and figuring out how things work is our competitive advantage. So I try to create a space for first gen women, women of color, other professionals who are late bloomers to really like leverage that knowledge with some guidance and support to help build wealth faster and with intention and in the way that they really want to live. I think that last part is really important, trying to figure out how you want to live according to your values, to honor you, your family, and what you believe in, versus being tricked into maybe running a rat race or building something that really isn't aligned with what you truly want.
I love that. I think that's so important is, when you think of your money, is that you should align it with your values and who you are and where you want to go instead of just, what you're told to do by the financial services industry, is that it's an individual journey. And I want to walk back to something you said because, we were talking pre-show about Bernadette Choi, who's been a guest on this podcast a couple times, who's introduced the concept of financial fluency rather than financial literacy. And for me, I love the concept of financial fluency because, as Bernadette puts it, nobody's feels judgment if they don't know how to speak another language. Where if you're not financially literate, you're financially illiterate, which is definitely a turnoff because you're not expected to know other languages, and money is a language. So I'm just curious, do you like that concept of financial fluency? Do you see that as applicable?
Oh, that's a really good question. I like the sound of it because it definitely tie in with languages and there could be levels. I think could also be levels of literacy as well. Like if you think someone starting at an early age or starting at the very beginning, if we take like the crawl, walk, run sort of scenario of when you're younger and you're in like elementary school, middle school, and high school, there's certainly levels of literacy that you build. I like how it sounds. I think there's a lot of parallels. I don't think you're literate or you're illiterate. I think there are certainly levels of literacy as well. I do like the branding though. It's definitely very good branding.
Yeah, it's a little different, but I think it comes back to when I think about first generation uh, people in general, is that you're learning a new language, you're learning a new culture. There's so many things that you have to absorb. Some people do bring over financial literacy from their prior country or whatever. I'm not sure quite the right way to put that, but they may already have some financial literacy, but learning the American financial system is different. But I
So,
think is
yeah.
oh,
Mhm.
sorry, go for it.
I think that goes back to what I said earlier about like the systems thinking and how folks approach it and learning how to apply that systems thinking that you've developed in terms of skills to the strategy here. I think there's a lot of interconnectedness and parallels. I don't think it's an either or type situation.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's always different for everybody because there's some blend.
Mhm.
I think one of the things, and people who watch and listen to the show have heard many guests talk about the difference for women and money, and how it's more challenging for women. That women start off, and women of color from an even worse place because of the gender pay gap, the pink
Mhm.
tax. There's a black tax, so there's all these things that really, I think, make it more challenging and more challenging for women of color. And we can see that in the representation in the financial services industry, like with CFPs, 30% of
Yes.
CFPs are women,
hmm
but 50% of Americans are women. So,
And if we think about it, there is like a surge in the silver tsunami crowd that's happening right now. You see a lot of women who are older that might be inheriting wealth. I think women live a lot longer, so there are challenges that are in place. I hear what you're saying in terms of the gap in the number of advisors who are focused on supporting women, the number of educators, the number of planners because women are seeking more relatable experts who can really understand their challenges, who can apply like the cultural lenses, who can automatically understand some of the contexts that they're dealing with. And for anyone who's listening, if you are, considering a career pivot or you're considering filling a need in the market. I think, as you shared and as we've discussed, there's a lot of opportunity in advisory financial services as a woman of color, as a person of color, to help meet that demand. Because I know for myself, when I was in early days, I couldn't find the voices that I was looking for from a trusted advisor, from a source, which is why I had to really like pursue that myself in terms of like building knowledge and awareness. I think everything that's been done so far has been fantastic, but it's really for a certain profile in mind. And I think that like profile doesn't really represent some of the nuances that folks are looking for that understand like if you're the first in your family, you are the backup plan. You don't have like those safety nets. Like, what does that look like? I think when you're figuring out a financial strategy, an investment strategy, a career strategy, that looks radically different from, we'll say, like a template that has been in place because a
mhm.
lot of us like it's been templatized to a certain profile that we've seen, which is the majority and doesn't really account for the special cases that like minorities and communities of color, women, late bloomers are really looking for, and especially first gen too.
Definitely. And we can see that in the statistics. With widows and
Mhm.
divorcees who leave their current financial planner, that 80 to 90% of widows will leave their current financial planner. And it's just that it's a feeling of connection. And I've had on a lot of female financial planners who've left their firms to start their own firms specifically for those reasons that you cite. So I think this is important for people to understand. And I think, for any consumer who's out there listening, is you can find somebody to work with who will relate to you. So it's important both from an advisory standpoint as and from a client standpoint that you have that connection and ability to see and hear each other. So I'm glad you're here in the industry and I'm glad you're doing the work that you do because I think it's important for the representation.
Oh, well, thank you, Tony. I'm so excited to be joined by folks like yourself who are wonderful allies in the space, creating room for voices like mine, as well as so many others that I've had the pleasure of hearing on the podcast as well, to try to make more room at the table, to build a bigger table, to make sure there's more representation in place to meet the growing demand for financial guidance and planning, advisory, and education.
Well, and I think you said it so well is that we need to build a bigger table. There's room at enough room at the table for everyone. We can expand the table rather than limiting it to what we've always done. And I think we're seeing that in the industry. And I think we're going to see that more in the age of AI, is that AI is going to replace a lot of the formulaic financial services and products process, that a lot of it's going to come down to connecting as a human and to having a conversation with your client, providing empathy and understanding and empowerment and helping them just stand out as who they are. So, one question that I had is, What are some of the biggest financial challenges, that first generation women face? What do you see?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest financial challenges, there's so many. A lot of them are not starting off with like generational wealth, or having like a baseline for financial knowledge that maybe other folks might have. They're also like often supporting their families while building like out their own wealth. And so establishing financial boundaries is incredibly important. How can you support yourself and your family and invest at the same time? Figuring out how to navigate the systems is also important because they're not necessarily like designed for you, both like on the financial side as well as on the career strategy side. There are also those like cultural expectations versus setting your financial goals. And to some degree, there is imposter syndrome around building wealth. And so it's multi-layered challenges that folks with inherited wealth or knowledge might not have. I do want to talk about the psychological piece though, because I feel like at least for some of my clients and the folks that I have helped, some of them really struggle with that like wealth building conversation. Am I like betraying my roots if I'm trying to pursue like financial success, financial independence? They're trying to figure out how to navigate student loans while being their family's safety net. And then having the conversations around money and success, it's just a lot to navigate. I recall this one conversation that I had with a client. She's in her mid 30s. Her family is religious, and she said that her father, who is a minister, said, money's evil. And she's working in the tech space, and she's trying to figure out how to pay off her student loans, how to grow her career. And she's like, am I evil if I try to pursue wealth, if I try to grow that for myself? So we had to untangle some of her limiting beliefs around money, because it's really difficult both like culturally and like religiously, and also like her corporate identity. It's like, no, money is not evil. Money in the hands of good people can do wonderful things. And I think that is something I really want to challenge, for women, for first gens, for people who are starting a little bit late. I think it's okay to want money so that you can take care of yourself and your family and to figure out like a strategy that will work for you.
Yeah, I think you said something really important is that it's okay to have money and to manage money. Um, that sometimes we feel like money is not for us or
Hmm.
this financial service or product is not for us. And I've seen this, I come from the insurance background and I was a life insurance analyst. And I know that a lot of people felt that like this is just way too complex.
Hmm.
And so I'm either not going to deal with it from a consumer standpoint or that a lot of advisors wouldn't monitor life insurance
Hmm.
policies because they're like, I have no idea what's going on here.
Hmm.
So I think addressing those complexities, but also I think what you said is so key about understanding how to navigate a system that is not designed for you. And I think that goes towards first generation, it goes
Hmm.
towards women, it goes towards people of color, but I think it just goes towards people in general. When I
Yes.
think about
Hmm.
insurance products and some of the insurance products that are being sold today, they're not designed for anybody. They're so crazy and complex that it's a
Yeah.
huge problem.
I think like the sense of like insurance, like the types of insurance, annuities, like all these vehicles, I'm sure you have written the books on them to share like what the nuances are. And you're right, like a lot of these vehicles don't make sense for people, or they're so overly complex, or there's so much jargon, or the structure is confusing that sometimes you as a person, as a consumer, as someone who's evaluating these products, might fall for the sales tactics. And I think some of these products Some of them are, I'm not saying all of them are bad. Some of them like might be very good and we can get into the nuances there. But some of them really don't make financial sense for a lot of folks, especially if maybe they have limited funds, if they have really complex circumstances of taking care of their families, taking care of themselves, like taking care of their children. Like those are not ideal products if maybe they're looking at something that requires a little bit more growth, that has higher returns, like short term. I do value diversification, so I do want to say that like explicitly so no one's like confused about that. But there are a lot of products out there, and it's helpful to have a person who will guide you on that journey to figure out like what makes the most sense for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I did want to ask you, just because, what I'm thinking of it is, you mentioned, you know, being able to spot uh, products that are not great. Is how can people, do you have any tips for people, just to kind of stay sharp and to stay
Mhm.
aware?
I think the best piece of advice that I can give is don't buy something that you don't understand. That is truly one of the best like baseline pieces of advice, and I think people forget that. They get um, sucked up into like what is being sold to them, the sales language, the marketing language, and or the testimonials that maybe come from a model or an actor or an influencer that looks like them, that might have like the same type of background. I would emphasize people to just take a pause, do some more research, figure out and understand, do they understand the terms, what the growth potential is, what some of the restrictions are, all the clauses, and really just apply some good critical thinking skills. And I like to call it a BS detector, a BS filter, Tony, because I think there's a lot of BS there in the market because there are all these wonderful products, but there's also a lot of things that just don't make sense for the average person. I think a lot of what foundational knowledge people need to know is, low cost index funds, investing, diversification, having that portfolio, and layering on beyond that. It's going to be nuances. I would also caution people to really, really take a pause, especially if they're evaluating anything that's like highly speculative. There's so much out there that coming from overconfident people who are essentially just selling you something. And you can get sucked in because you're like, oh, that sounds great. This person seems like they know what they're doing. And they, as a consumer, you might get sucked in because you're like, well, I learned this thing. And then you keep researching that. And with the algorithms in place, you'll just get fed more and more of that same type of knowledge. And so I'd really ask people to pause and think, okay, let's take a contrarian type view. Why shouldn't I do this? Like, why wouldn't this be a good idea? So you can really truly do the research and get that like full picture.
Yeah, I love that. Take a contrarian view and ask why you shouldn't do it, because I think that's something that's missed is, I think it's the old Ben Franklin matrix of the pros and cons. And we don't do that with financial services and products is, we are just looking at like, ooh, this is going to be great. And it's
Hmm.
like, well, is it? Here are the problems,
Yeah.
and you have to outline that.
Yeah, beware of the hot tips. It says sponsors, if it said like partners, if it says like influencer, advertising. So beware of what they're advertising you. If you're not sure, you can always get more than one opinion and meet several folks because the first person or even the second person might not resonate with what you're like looking for, or they're really good at sales tactics. So just really do your research.
That's awesome. That's great advice. So, how can educators and advisors better show up for those who are often left out of the traditional conversations, just like we've been talking about women and people of color and first gen?
Yeah, I think there's a shortage of representation in the advisory planning and education space. For folks who can apply that cultural lens, I think that it would be important for the existing advisors to obtain the cultural awareness education. I think we also need to do more recruitment and growth and development of bringing folks into the space who can relate and who can share in the cultural identities, who can understand like that intersection and how everything works. There are a lot of opportunities for teaching. I think with the new generation of like Gen Z and like future Gen Alphas as well, it's going to be less of, hey, I'm so good, like I'm an expert, like I know all these things, and to talk down to someone when what they're looking for is a lot of trust and like relationship building to understand exactly what folks are working towards, what they're working for, to understand like their money scripts, to understand what their unique goals are, and to really understand like those challenges. I like to say again, because it can be hard to have, and I say this personally, because when I first started, I did like seek out some financial help as well from like certified planners and advisors. And sometimes it would be me and my partner sitting next to each other, and they would just talk to my partner. It was absolutely infuriating because it was like a two-person type situation. And as someone who's independent, I manage my wealth separately. We are combined in terms of like how we have our finances, but like we're very independent in how like we think. And so if your advisor, your planner is only talking to one partner versus the other, because they identify with that partner, I feel like that can be very isolating. It also creates risky situations for women, for wives, for people who are homemakers, if they place a lot of trust in their partner or they are in the room when they're not getting the education that they need to be aware of how investments are set up, like how estate plans are made, how family is going to be taken care of. Because what if they get divorced? Divorce rate's really high. What if their partner passes away? Like they don't know how to manage those finances. So it's really important to create that education. And I think that's so wonderful. Again, what you're doing to share like the different POVs and how we can really approach that. Hopefully that did answer the question. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. And I think that gets back to the earlier statistic we discussed about
Mhm.
why so many widows and divorcees leave their
Yes.
current financial planners. It's exactly for that reason.
Yeah. But we're trying to do better. I think the CFP AFC groups have made like huge headways from what I've heard of trying to recruit more women to this space, like trying to create that room. At the same time, there's still folks who leave and then they become like RIAs themselves, or they like provide offshoots. I think the larger institutional groups that have been around forever have been slower to adopt policies that maybe even make sense for someone who is an advisor that's trying to grow in at their company, but might feel restricted just based on how things are set up career-wise for themselves and like what their like career headroom looks like, what that like progression looks like while being able to like grow their families.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And, it takes me, you said something, and it's odd because one of the statistics about CFPs is that the percentage who are women hasn't really grown that much over the last 20 years, even though there's been tremendous effort and money and thought towards it, is that it's not really making a
Oh,
significant difference. And I'm just using CFP as a measuring stick.
yeah. Why do you think that is? You've had a lot of conversations as well. Like, have you gotten additional insight from folks in terms of what could be improved?
I think what can be improved is that, is that we need to understand that these issues are real, that there is a real gender pay gap. And then there's also a gender wealth gap, is like you talked earlier about a longer life expectancy for women. So combine that with the gender pay gap, and then women oftentimes are the primary caregivers both for their children as well as their parents. So women
Yeah.
may have multiple gaps in their career, which does impact their
Yeah.
long-term earning capacity, that these things are real, that Black women carry more college debt than any other demographic. That is real. So I think that's part of it. But I think the other part that's always been incredibly silly to me is hearing someone say, well, how do I speak to women? And it's like, well, are you married?
We're
Do you
not
have a
minority. We're
sister?
50% of the population here.
Yeah, are
We're
you
just
married?
about,
How do
yeah.
you yeah, how do you talk to your wife? How do you talk to your mother? You don't think about that and go, boy, I have to talk to my mom in a very special way. And it's like, you just have that conversation. So I think that's part of it. But I think we also have to do the work that I'm doing and elevate other people who are not necessarily elevated anywhere else. So we have to take it on, for talking to other white males, in financial services, we have to be part of that. But we also have to recognize that there's now this whole separate community of women of color who have huge non-traditional financial services communities, like Tiffany Alicia's Budgetistas, the Dream Catchers. I think last time I checked, she had like 500,000 people in her Dream Catchers community. So it's like, okay, well, we have to be willing to change. So, I mean, that's the longer answer. But what I really think is the important thing, and you've said it, and every single one of my female guests has said it, is that we have to learn to listen, and we have to see
Yeah.
women and talk to women. And that's the biggest thing. And that's why women financial planners leave a male dominated firm, is they don't feel like they're seen by the other partners. That's why women leave their financial planners. They don't feel seen and heard. That it gets really, really basic. It's just communicating. So I don't
Yeah.
know. What do you think? What do you think is going to change it?
I I have hope, Tony. I have hope that, there are people who are allies that want to step into the roles and that gap in the market. Because there's a big gap in the market, like you alluded to, with not influencers. To some degree, influencers have a space, um, but with people who are in the education space, who are in the coaching space, advisory space, planning space, to really meet that need because people have the power of choice and there are more options at the table. I'd like to see more options available to folks in terms of who they can resonate with, who they can learn from. And if we fail to do that, I think the person seeking that help will go look for that support elsewhere. And I would rather have that be a trusted advisor, planner, someone who has to report to a board than someone who is pulling a prompt from AI and sounds really good on camera and is effectively selling you something. And you have listened to them so many times that they resonate when that is not personalized advice. That's not like personal planning. That's not going to help you long term. And I think that creates a lot of risk. So I have hope that people like yourself, like conversations like these, will help to meet people where they are and to help fill that gap.
I have hope as well, and that's why I'm doing this work, is because I want to raise voices that are not heard as much. So, I appreciate guests like you who come on and share their insights. To wrap up, Linda, we'll switch gears to what I call the Get Ready Hot Take Trio. And these are three quick questions that I ask all of my guests. The first one is, what money myth are you trying to break?
The biggest money myth that I want to break for first gens is you need a lot of money to get started. That is the worst thing that you can consider because if you put off investing and you think I'll just start investing when I have money, or I'm too behind, just that worry, that like anxiety, you will lose out on that opportunity to like compound your interest. You will lose out on getting at the minimum, like the match at your company, and you'll leave money on the table. So I think people really need to get started as soon as possible, even if it's only $25 a month in like your 20s. Um, I would also tie to that, pay off that debt. There are a lot of products out there that effectively are going to throw you into more of like a death trap or like a spiral. Um, I have very strong opinions about buy now, pay later plans, Tony, for example. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm with you on the buy now, pay later plans, and maybe that would be an interesting uh, podcast episode. Because it is a form of debt. And I
it
don't
is.
think
Mhm.
people, I don't know if you've seen, but there's a debate as to whether the credit bureaus should
Yes,
consider it as debt. And yeah, I'm with you. It's debt. Um, you know, because it's money that you owe and that you have to pay later.
it
So
is. It is money that you owe. It's put onto products. It is creating a frictionless experience between, how you consider spending money and what you spend. And so it just goes away. And I think there could be more transparency around it and how it impacts you long term, like fee disclosures, all those things.
definitely, definitely. So the next question is, let's get out the time machine. What advice would you give your younger self if you could go back in time knowing what you know now about money?
I would say, your worth is not defined by your wealth. I think people need to take apart like that idea. Like wealth is just a tool to build freedom with. There are a lot of ways that you can apply the tools that you have in your toolkit, and your measure of value does not determine who you are as a person. I think there's a lot of pressure with first gens, with women leaders, with people who are in communities of color, where the idea that wealth is incredibly important is true, but you have the ability to shape who you are as a person, to like outgrow those money stories, that identity, and live according to your values. It's not just going to be like some magic number that will save you. I think you have to figure out how you're going to pursue that in a way that is true to you, that's like meaningful, um, and that you feel really good about at the end of the day. So it's that, is that money good for you? Is that like mindset something that you feel good about? And is it like a path that you feel good being on?
That's fantastic advice. I love that. Your worth is not defined by your wealth, and it's different for all of us. But we feel makes us wealthy. So I think that's wonderful advice. So the final question is, what is your number one tip for changing the way we think about money?
I think that I love math. There's everyone has like this magic number in their head. And the number one tip is money is just a tool to create the life that you want. And a lot of what I do is focused on lifestyle design. So you figure out what that perfect day, week retirement looks like, and you build around that and really customize that towards you. in the investments that feel good for you, in the strategies that feel good, on the timeline that you want. And that's different for everybody. That could be, I want to retire on a beach. It could be, I want to be able to take care of my family. It could be, I want to take a break in between before I pursue like the next chapter of my career. So that's really, really important. It's just a tool at the end of the day. I don't think it should be something that consumes you, because it could be something that people definitely get lost in the pursuit of obtaining.
Definitely. And we can look at, somebody like Elon Musk is there doesn't seem to be
I
any
don't
amount of
think we need
money.
billionaires in the world.
I would agree with you, but I mean, just right
Yeah.
now, and this may be dated by the time this episode comes out, he was awarded another $26 billion
Mm.
bonus, and it's like, what? That's just so ridiculous. It's just like, what does he need with another 26 billion? Now, I could use another 26 billion, but
A couple million for me, couple million for you and some of your audience. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I could give away a million here, a million there. But anyway,
Yeah.
but I think that goes towards exactly what you're saying is that money is just a tool to create the life that you want. And that if we look at him and Jeff Bezos and some of these other people, are they happy? I don't know.
I
It
don't
doesn't
know. They
seem
look
like they're
happy on
happy.
photo, but they are stage photos. So who really knows?
Exactly, because it seems like they just want more money. But so I
Yeah.
love your advice and to focus on the life design. So, Linda, where can people learn more about you, check out your work, learn more about your coaching practice?
Yeah, so they can find me at www.goodforyoumoney.com. It's where I share resources, guides, and information, as well as details about my coaching services and speaking and workshops, etc. I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram, so I'll shoot you over those links, Tony, so you have that. On LinkedIn, I'm under Linda Ta Yonemoto. They can actually follow my content, engage me directly in the comments section. And on Instagram, I'm at goodforyoumoney.com or good for you money. All one word.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And for everybody watching and listening, is I will share all those links in the show notes, so you can go to the show notes to check those out. So, Linda, thanks for coming on the podcast today and sharing your insights.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you, Tony. Really looking forward to connecting with your audience and sharing like practical tips about careers, money, leadership, and growing wealth as a professional. If anyone does find me from your podcast, I really hope they mention that they do. And it was such a pleasure connecting.
Yeah, definitely. I really appreciate that. This has been a wonderful conversation. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning into this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If something today sparked a new perspective or changed the way you think about money, please be sure to share it with a friend and to subscribe. You can also join the Get Ready movement at tonystewart.com to get access to my free Get Ready toolkit, my newsletter, and a whole bunch of other free resources. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.